Kreth-Solav had already prepared the rejection notice when the human walked in. This was standard practice for a senior examiner of his standing. The notice had been drafted the afternoon before, reviewed that morning, and placed in the certification queue under the heading Provisional Denial, Incomplete Method Submission. Kreth-Solav had reviewed 11,000 method submissions in 22 years of service to the Compact Commerce Licensing Bureau. He could tell inside the first 3 pages whether something was going to clear certification. The human submission had not cleared his first page. The name on the file was Yuna Seo, 22 years old, listed as a human exchange placement in the Bureau's Administrative Cataloging Division. She had submitted a method compliance filing 7 weeks ago, requesting provisional certification for what she called a standardized production protocol under the exchange program's small operator provisions. Kreth-Solav had flagged it for personal review when he noticed the source. Exchange cataloging staff did not typically file method submissions. They filed indices. He had read the submission on a Tuesday between 2 legitimate filings from a Verath precision manufacturer and a Kelasar chemical collective. Both of those filings had been thorough, technically nuanced, and built on decades of species-specific craft development. The human submission had been 31 pages, 31, with diagrams. The Veth-Cal, Kreth-Solav species, chitinous and angular, with compound eyes that could parse 6 parallel data feeds without losing focus, were known throughout the compact for their administrative precision. Kreth-Solav considered this a point of professional pride. He had reviewed the 31 pages with the same rigor he applied to everything. He had found them by every relevant standard insufficient. The method described something a Veth-Cal nursery supervisor might explain to first-cycle apprentices. Step 1, prepare the workspace to a defined specification. Step 2, gather materials in a defined order. Step 3, execute each production stage according to a written checklist. Step 4, verify the output against the checklist before releasing it. Repeat. The submission contained no reference to the specialized technique gradations required under compact certification standards. It made no allowances for the tactile variance adjustments that skilled operators spent years developing. It assumed, with what Kreth-Solav could only describe as the calm confidence of someone who did not know what they did not know, that consistency of process was equivalent to mastery of craft. It was not. Yuna Seo arrived at the review window at the scheduled time, which Kreth-Solav noted with mild approval. Exchange placements were frequently imprecise about scheduling. She was carrying a flat-panel data tablet and a printed copy of her submission, which struck him as unnecessarily analog, and she settled into the applicant chair across the review desk with the ease of someone who had been in administrative offices before and was comfortable there. "Good morning, Examiner," she said. "Good morning." Kreth-Solav opened the file on his primary display. "I have reviewed your method submission under Exchange Provision 14C. I will be providing a provisional denial today. You are entitled to hear the full grounds and to register a response before the denial is finalized." Yuna Seo nodded. She did not look surprised. "Your submission describes a process framework which, while internally consistent, does not meet the compact certification standards for methods intended for multi-operator commercial application." He pulled up the relevant section of the standards document on his secondary display, rotating it slightly so she could see it. Standard 7, subsection 3. A certifiable production method must demonstrate skill tier differentiation, allowing for advancement of operator competence over time, and must acknowledge species-specific adaptation requirements for mixed operator environments. He gestured at her submission. "Your method does not differentiate by skill tier. Every step is written at what your filing calls baseline clarity. You have no advanced operator variant. You have no species adaptation notes." "That's intentional," she said. "I understand that it is intentional. That is precisely the problem. He set down his stylus with the quiet precision that Vethkal used when they wished to signal the end of a particular line of argument. Mastery of craft cannot be reduced to a checklist. The compact certification standards exist to protect operators, consumers, and the integrity of the commerce registry. A method that does not require or develop skill is not a method the Bureau can certify. I understand your position, she said. She said it the way people said things when they had understood a position for some time and had already formed a different view of it. Kreth-Solav had conducted enough review sessions to recognize that tone. It was not argumentative. It was the tone of someone who had brought something with them. Is there a specific concern you wish to register before the denial is finalized? He said. I wanted to give you an update on the adoption numbers, she said, before the denial goes in. He waited. She set her data tablet on the review desk, face up, and slid it across to him. The screen showed a map of the exchange circuit, 14 stations, each marked with a small indicator. Each indicator was green. Those are stations where the method is currently in use, she said, voluntarily, by operators who picked it up through the exchange's open access training library. The submission has been available for review in the library since the filing date. Kreth-Solav looked at the map. He looked at it for a moment longer than he had intended to. 14 stations, she said. None of them are waiting for certification. They implemented it when they saw the output consistency numbers from the first 3 sites. It spread station to station without any promotion on my end. I just filed it. The Vethkal's compound eyes were not built for visible expression in the way some species' faces were, but Kreth-Solav was aware of a particular stillness that had come over him. He was, internally, recalibrating. He looked at the map again. 14 stations across the circuit was not a trivial adoption footprint. The circuit ran 41 licensed production operations. The method had reached a third of them in 7 weeks without certification, without a sales effort, without a mandate. Voluntary adoption of an uncertified method, he said carefully, does not satisfy the Bureau's certification requirements. No, Yuna agreed. I'm not here to argue that it does. I'm here to update you before the denial is finalized, because the denial will note that the method has not achieved meaningful adoption, and I wanted the record to reflect that that particular finding is no longer accurate. He looked at her. She was looking back at him with the mild patience of someone who had planned this conversation, and was content to let it move at whatever pace the room required. You filed 7 weeks ago, he said. Yes. Knowing that the submission would likely be denied under Standard 7, subsection 3. I thought it was possible, she said. Your standards are built around methods that require skill development. This one is built around methods that don't require skill development. That's a real difference. I expected it to be a sticking point. And you placed it in the open access training library, in anticipation of that outcome. I placed it in the training library because the exchange program's charter says I can share educational materials with any registered operator. I'm not a licensing officer. I'm a cataloging placement. I can share what I've learned. The operators who wanted to try it did. The ones who didn't. She gestured at the tablet. 14 said yes. Kreth-Solav was quiet for a moment. He pulled up the production output reports for the stations on the map, cross-referencing them through the Bureau's Commerce Registry. The registry updated automatically from station operations logs. He had access to it from this desk, and it took him perhaps 90 seconds to pull the relevant data for all 14 sites. The output consistency numbers were, without exception, above the certified baseline for the relevant production categories. Not dramatically, the method was not producing spectacular results. It was producing reliable results. Week after week, site after site, operator after operator, the numbers sat in a narrow band just above the baseline and stayed there. No spikes, no crashes, no variance events logged. That was the thing about certified methods with skill-tier differentiation. They produced excellent results when operated by advanced-tier practitioners. They also produced high variance when operated by apprentices, or when a station lost its senior staff. The numbers for those sites across the circuit showed the familiar pattern: solid averages, wide variance bands. The 14 stations using the human's uncertified checklist showed almost no variance band at all. Kreth-Solav set the registry display down. He thought about his provisional denial notice, currently sitting in the certification queue, containing the phrase "has not demonstrated meaningful adoption in commercial environments." "The output consistency data is in the registry," Yuna said. She had not looked at his screen, but she clearly knew what was there. "I didn't put it there. The operators log it automatically. I just told you where to look." "I'm aware of where the data is," Kreth-Solav said, with some precision. "Of course," she said. He examined the denial notice on his screen. It was well drafted. It cited Standard 7, subsection 3 correctly. It was accurate as of 7 weeks ago. It was, as of today, sitting beside a registry that showed 14 production sites voluntarily adopting the method and achieving consistent, above baseline results without any certification, any oversight, or any advanced-tier practitioners on most of their floors. The Bureau's role was to certify methods that met the standards. The standards existed to ensure operators and consumers could rely on certified methods. If a method was already demonstrating reliable output across a third of the circuit, the denial was still legally correct under Standard 7, subsection 3, but the denial's implicit premise, which was that the method had not proven itself in practice, was factually incorrect. He would need to look at this more carefully. "I would like to schedule a secondary review," he said. "The denial will not be finalized today." Yuna Seo nodded. She was not smiling exactly, but there was something in her expression that registered the shift without making anything of it. She picked up her data tablet. "I can come back whenever suits the Bureau's schedule," she said. "I'm here through the end of the exchange placement." Kreth-Solav made a note in the file. He did not tell her what conclusion he expected to reach at the secondary review, because he had not yet fully reached it himself, and the Vethkal did not announce conclusions before they had been fully examined. But the direction of travel was becoming clear. He had drafted the denial because the method looked, on paper, like the work of someone who did not understand what mastery meant. No skill-tier differentiation, no species-adaptation notes, no allowance for the accumulated wisdom that certified methods were built to capture and transmit. What the method had, it turned out, was something the standards had never explicitly asked for: the ability to produce reliable results regardless of who was following it. It did not require mastery. It produced consistency. In the 14 stations currently using it, that consistency had not declined, varied, or degraded. It had simply held. Kreth-Solav's 22 years of certification work had been built on the principle that skill and consistency were linked, that you achieved consistent output by developing skilled practitioners. The human's method proposed that you could also achieve consistent output by removing the dependency on skill altogether. It was not a sophisticated idea. It was, if anything, a very simple one. The kind of simple that looked obvious once it was sitting in front of you, with 14 sets of production numbers attached. He looked at the file one more time before Yuna Seo reached the door. "Ms. Seo," he said. She paused. How long did it take the first station to implement the method? She considered. "About 3 days," she said. "1 day to read the checklist, 1 day to run a trial batch, 1 day to decide they were happy with the output." He processed that. 3 days to implement, 7 weeks to reach 14 stations. No certification, no mandate, no expertise required. "And the stations that haven't adopted it," he said. "Do you expect them to?" Yuna Seo thought about this for a moment. with the mild seriousness of someone being asked a question they found genuinely interesting. "Probably," she said. "The ones who haven't yet mostly have senior operators who have been running their own certified method for a long time and are comfortable with it. When their senior operators rotate out, the next crew will want something easier to pick up." She paused. "The checklist will still be in the library." Kreth-Solav made one more note in the file. He had been an examiner for 22 years, and in 22 years the certification system had worked exactly as designed: specialized, credentialed, skill differentiated. Every method that had come through his review desk had been built by experienced practitioners to capture the knowledge of experienced practitioners. That was the correct way to build a method. That was, as far as the Bureau's standards were concerned, the only way to build a method. No one had ever submitted a method built on the assumption that the future operators would not be experienced practitioners. No one had needed to, he supposed, until someone did. The secondary review took place 6 days later. Kreth-Solav arrived with updated registry data showing that 3 additional stations had voluntarily adopted the method in the interval, bringing the total to 17. He also arrived with a draft amendment to the certification standards, prepared in consultation with 2 colleagues he trusted, proposing the addition of a new method classification: consistency primary protocol, applicable to submissions that demonstrated documented, sustained output reliability across a minimum of 12 independent operator sites without requiring skill tier differentiation. The amendment was not, strictly speaking, required to certify the human submission. There were other mechanisms, but the VethCal were, as a matter of institutional habit, meticulous about precedent, and Kreth-Solav preferred the record to be clean. Yuna Seo arrived at the scheduled time with her flat-panel data tablet and her printed copy of the submission. She did not seem surprised by the draft amendment. She read it, asked one clarifying question about the minimum site threshold, and said it seemed reasonable. Kreth-Solav told her the provisional certification would be issued that afternoon. She thanked him, collected her documents, and left. She did not linger. She did not make anything of it. Outside the review window, the Bureau's corridor stretched on in its usual administrative quiet, framed certification awards on one wall, the registry terminals on the other, a handful of other applicants waiting in the gallery chairs for their own scheduled reviews. Kreth-Solav watched her go and then looked back at the file. 17 stations, a checklist, 31 pages with diagrams. He had spent 22 years certifying methods that were built on the premise that expertise was the thing worth protecting. The human's method had been built on a different premise entirely, that the thing worth protecting was the result. They were not the same premise. He had never been asked to consider whether they might both be correct. He filed the certification, updated the standards amendment into the draft queue, and returned to the next item in his tray. The checklist was now certified. The other 24 stations on the circuit would, in his professional estimation, make up their own minds about it. The library would be where it had always been. That was, he thought, rather the point.